My name is Riley Paige Fillion, and I am interviewing Mr. Martin Tillapaugh on Tuesday, April 4th, 2017. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day after being canceled on.
Yeah, it's okay, Riley, and I'm thrilled to be here.
To start off with, I would like to know how you are connected to the local community.
Well, my family's actually been here for many years. Next year will be 130 years. Where we have a funeral home, because a part of my job is as a funeral director, that was bought in 1888 by my great-grandfather, and we started a funeral business there, so I'm a fourth generation there. So I grew up here. I was born here in 1950 and went to school right here in this very building and went to the old high school, which you wouldn't even know was once there. So I've been here all my life.
I understand that you went to school in this building. Can you tell me about your life growing up in this community, including your school experiences and social activities in Cooperstown?
I can. And I want to thank you for giving me a little tour today, because I haven't been back down some of those hallways. But I was in the very first class that started here back in 1955 when they built this building. It was much smaller back then. They didn't have some of these extra wings. This room, this library, I don't think was here, or at least not as I recall it. It wasn't as big, put it that way. And I started in kindergarten. It was right down this wing, straight ahead of us as you come in the door. I had Mrs. McManus and then Mrs. Meehan and Mrs. Michaels as some of my original teachers in first and second grade. And then later went over to the other wing for my fourth and fifth grade year, and that was Mrs. Lehman. And Miss Bliss was in there too. I remembered that teacher. And then I was upstairs for my fifth and sixth grade. Then I went over to the old high school. If you know where the apartments are now, Cooper Lane Apartments over on Chestnut Street, was where the old high school was. And I went to school there and graduated from there. And interestingly enough, I was in the last class, 1968, to actually graduate from that building. Played sports for the school, and I played baseball. I wrestled for 4 years, played tennis, had a great time, and have great memories of Cooperstown schools. Maybe I didn't even answer that question the whole way. You also asked what connection, and I think I was born at the hospital here. And so I grew up right here. I was away for about 27 years practicing law with a large firm down in Binghamton. And then I came to own that firm. And then I retired about 10, 12 years, oh my goodness, probably more than that, 15 years ago. I always wanted to retire a little early, and I came back here. But then I took over the funeral home, because I was also a licensed funeral director, and started running that. And then I've just continued to practice law, and I'm also an accountant, so I do accounting work. I think you've seen my office over behind the funeral home.
Yep.
So that's my connection.
What is it like raising your family in Cooperstown?
Well, part of my family was raised down in my first 3 children. I had 4 children. And the first 3 actually graduated down in the Binghamton area from a We Go Free Academy. But then I moved back here when my youngest daughter, I don't know if you know Lily, but Lily graduated from Cooperstown. We moved back here when she would have been in 8th or 9th grade. And so she graduated from here. But I was here all the time with the kids. We bought a house here back in the early 1990s, just so I could come up and spend time. And that's at Stonehouse, right next to the funeral home. And then we bought the camp that I think you've even been at, up on the lake. And so it gave us a lot of opportunity to come up here and enjoy Cooperstown, because I think Cooperstown is a special place to raise children. There's a lot of things you can do. That lake gives you a lot, and then you have the Farmers Museum and everything else, so there's always something going on.
Yeah. So So, what are your hobbies, and what do you do for entertainment as an adult in your town?
Oh my goodness, my wife will eat, and I think my wife, but she will tell you I don't have enough hobbies. I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic. I tend to spend a lot of time in my office. Gosh, hobbies, my family's very, very important to me. We travel a lot with them. In fact, I'm pulling Emerson, who you know, and Wyatt out of school Thursday because we're going to a Broadway theater play, Sound of Music. So we love to do things with our kids and grandchildren, as I think you know. So we're always off on some project, or we take them on a vacation every year. My kids, I don't know. I don't really can't say I have a lot of hobbies. I have. Oh, goodness, just collecting little things, but most of the time, I guess my jobs are my hobbies, as sad as that sounds. Love to travel, but that's about it.
As an owner of a funeral home in our community for many years, please speak about the challenges you've faced along with anything else you'd like us to know.
Okay. Well, boy, the funeral home has been in my family for next April, 130 years. That same building, and each generation has added a little bit more to it, so that's why it kind of wiggles and waggles around and so on. Challenges, I grew up in that house. I grew up upstairs, and that's where my father and mother were, and so I was used to the house. It wasn't that I had a strong calling. I had started practicing law and had my accounting degree and was working in a firm doing that. But I just had a kind of an interior desire to continue that business because it had been in the family for so long. My great-grandfather bought it, and then my grandmother was also the second licensed woman funeral director and embalmer in the state of New York. My grandfather was president of the New York State Funeral Directors, so I had a lot of connections. And I grew up in the funeral business, so it was not one that was unusual or foreign for me. So never really felt it was a challenge. I think I have a special bent to talk to people, and I enjoy dealing with people at that time and talking to them and trying to help them. So the hardest challenge probably is just helping people when they're going through a very hard time in their life.
As you've already said, I know you're also a lawyer. What can you tell us about that?
Well, after high school here, I went to Hartwick College down in Oneonta, so I didn't get very far away. But I did well at Hartwick. And had the opportunity to, we're very fortunate here in this community with all the Clark scholarships. And I received one of those for college. And back then, they were a little less formal than now, and they'd continue paying. And I was lucky enough because when I graduated from college, I'd written a thank you letter. This tells why thank you letters are important. To Mr. Clark, who had afforded me the opportunity to have a scholarship, and he was very generous. He wrote back. He was thrilled that I had done well in college, and he offered to take on my law school. I don't know why I was really drawn to it. I had worked as an intern for Congressman Fish, who was our old congressman from this area, and then worked for him for part of a year down in Washington. And so I thought law would be interesting. I went to a school called Dickinson School. At the time, it was about the fifth oldest private law school. It's now part of Penn State. And I also did some semesters at Georgetown down in Washington and got my law degree, and then went back and got an accounting degree. And that's how it came about. Started practicing law down in the Binghamton area with a firm, and that grew, and it ultimately ended up, after about 15 years, I owned the firm and had a number of attorneys working for me, and we just did fairly well, and then that's where I retired from. I sold it to even a bigger firm. It was like the whale eating the little fish, and I sold that and moved back here. Did I answer your question? I talk too much sometimes. If I don't, just tell me.
Do you have any experiences that involve Otsego Lake?
Oh my goodness. I could talk to you a lot about Otsego Lake. I grew up, back then, my dad was the certified, my dad was an interesting man. He was like a Renaissance person, if you know what that means. He could do a lot of things. He was a pilot. There was an airport here in town, and he had owned that and ran that and had airplane flights. But he was also the boat instructor, so you got your license when you were 13. And so I took the lessons from him, and we had boats from the time I was young on. A sailboat, canoes, and then motorboats. And so I grew up out on that lake. I'd get up early in the morning, and since our house is near the lake, I'd walk down. We'd go out on the lake. Starting when I was about 15, we started racing boats. You know, you start racing around the lake, and then we started racing more and more professionally. I don't know if you're aware, if you've ever seen, there's some trophies around. We won some U.S. national titles. I won the Canadian Grand Nationals, and in 1967 or 67, we set a world's record, believe it or not, with an outboard motorboat. So I'd spent hours out there, hours and hours, and used to water ski and swim, and we'd have parties out there and do all sorts of things. My parents had a big boat, and we'd be out on the boat, so we had a lot of fun out there, Riley, and didn't do much fishing, but just a lot of fun sports activities.
Anything else?
Wow, what else? We canoed a long way down the river once. Some of my very good friends, David Rath, people that were friends of mine that went through school with me, paddled all the way to the Chesapeake our senior year. I did not, but I paddled with some friends down to Oneonta one weekend. So that was a lot of fun. So we got to use the Susquehanna. And I always like to go down when I have friends here. Even to this day, I love to take them down, show them the lake, and let them throw stones across the Susquehanna because it's so large, just a few miles south of here, that it's fun to be able to brag you can throw a stone across it. But what else did I don't know that I spent a lot of time. I went to Hyde Bay Camp for boys because I wasn't as good a student back in high school as I should have been, so I was sent there to tutor. That was a camp up on Hyde Bay, and it was part of the old Gilman School in Baltimore, a boys' school. And so I tutored there. I stayed there part of the time, and there's some days I'd take the boat up and dock there, and I tutored French and math, which was kind of what I had to do because those are my poorest subjects. And that was on the lake. It's hard to study, by the way, when you're sitting around the lake, and it's so beautiful out.
How has Cooperstown changed over the years?
Well, Cooperstown was, when I was growing up, probably that typical small town. We had several shoe stores, derricks and vans. We had a couple of men's stores and clothing stores, and you had Lippett's jewelry store. You had Al Pahowski's jewelry store. So we had jewelry stores. We had, and I'm going to turn off, this is my phone. I'm the one being bad right now. Sorry. We had a lot of I am so sorry. This is another call. Sorry, guys. Let me just put this on the silent. Okay, so I'm sorry. Where were we? This is a good test of your concentration today.
Yep. How has Cooperstown changed over the years?
Well, so we had a lot of little stores. We had grocery stores. We had Hi Michael's, the family now owns the Fly Creek Cider Mill, had a wonderful little grocery store on Main Street, kind of where Doubleday Restaurant is. And I can remember my mother sending me up there for groceries. And back then, there was the woman at the cashier's counter would write down what you got. So I'd go in and Mom might say, pick up some bread and milk, and she'd just write it down, and they'd get a bill at the end of the month. So I'd go in. Of course, that let me sneak in and get candy sometimes, and then Mom would see the bill later on. But so we had that, and we had Augur's bookstore on the corner where you could buy pens and papers and all of that. The only real souvenir store when I was growing up was F.R. Woods, right next to what was then Newberry's. I can remember when the original Newberry's was there back when CVS, where CVS is now on Main Street, that was the original Newberry's, and it was 2 floors. It was a floor down below, and I used to go in there and get toys and everything. So there were a lot more varied stores. Not as many restaurants, and certainly not as many souvenir shops. And the village seemed a little smaller to me. I think it's gotten a little more cosmopolitan, a little more city-like. I know that sounds strange in a little town, but things are a lot different than they were back then. We'd go out on our bicycles early in the morning. Your parents didn't really worry about you. We'd usually pick up a couple of baseball games, softball over in the park. And back then we could go out on Doubleday Field and play, and they didn't care. And we'd be out there with baseball games. The only thing that would stop us is if somebody came along that had a real team and was going to go out there. And we'd be down on the lake and out on the lake. And so it was I think it was a little easier time in that regard. Nowadays it's a little less likely kids are going to be allowed to just run free like that. Churches were much like they are today. We always attended church, so I'm familiar, the churches were similar. Trying to think what else. There was a wonderful youth center that's missing now. The old fire station, where the new fire station is, it was a gorgeous old building that today they wouldn't be allowed to tear down because it was so beautiful in its architecture. But on the second floor of that was what we called the youth center. And it was open every night till 9. Kids could go there. The teachers were paid somehow. I don't know how, but they monitored it. You'd walk in, you had to sign in and sign out. But they had pool tables and music playing. There was a big phonograph, and you put your records on, or they had records there. They had shuffleboard, and they had things to read, and the teachers always yelled at you like they do here, too, I'm sure. And weekends, it was open till 11. And there was always, I remember Mr. Moore and there were a bunch, the Mr. Collier would be the monitors, and it was the whole second floor of the fire station. And we just had so much fun, and it was always available, and it was a safe place to go, and they kind of watched out for you, and if you did something wrong, they would let you know, and your parents would usually find out. That was the other thing. Everybody knew everybody. And my mother had been a teacher here. She was the English teacher at Cooperstown in the 40s. And so she knew all the teachers, so they always made sure they called her if I wasn't behaving. But that was a neat thing. That was an activity that just is gone now, and I wish it wasn't. The last thing I can think of immediately is the movie theater. That was wonderful. You know where they have the marquee now? Well, that was our movie theater, and they always had great movies, and as kids, we'd just go in and out of there. They had a Saturday afternoon matinee, we'd go there, and it also was neat because they could lift the screen, and there was a stage. And I can remember performances, some very famous violinist there, and a very famous pianist, and the school would take us down. And so that was kind of fun. The other thing, now that I'm thinking about the school taking us on little school trips, my dad had a huge train collection and a big, huge train table that was, I don't even know, couldn't even tell you how big it is. It's mammoth. And the school used to have a school trip every year of all the kids. They'd come down, and he'd show how the trains in the little towns operated. So back then it was much more parochial, much more insular, much smaller feeling. So that's it. Stores changed. People don't change that much, though.
What is your fondest memory of your life in this community?
Probably family and the fact that it's a little town. I love little towns. I think they're a great place to raise family. It's probably, remember Hillary Clinton wrote a book about it takes a village. Well, it's probably true, because I could go in and out of homes all over the village growing up and knew everybody, but if I did something wrong, the parents would yell at me. But it was great, and we were good kids. We didn't cause any problems. We were silly like all kids are. But we would be all over, and those are probably my fondest memories, just the love that kind of emanated from people all throughout the village. You knew everybody, so it was kind of fun. And I'm a small town person, even though I live down in Binghamton and have practiced law kind of all over. I'm a small town person. I like people. So that's my fondest, is the people here and that.
What's your favorite annual event?
I know what that is. And this again goes right back to family. And you may know, because you know Emerson disappears every summer. I think we're now on our 18th year, although we did it before that, but 18 straight years. We take all of our family, Meg and I, my wife and I, rent a big old huge house down on the Outer Banks in North Carolina. And it sounds strange to go down in the summer, but it's just something, it prolongs we always tease it prolongs the summer, because it's done right before everybody goes back to school. And we take our children, and none of them have ever missed. I got to knock on wood, okay? They all show up. Our rule is we'll pay for everything as long as you get here. So they all show up, and we all are there, and it's a huge old house. And it's right on the beach, so we can just go out and swim in the surf, and we're in the water a lot, and the grandchildren now do that all, and it's just a great time. That's my best memory each year, is our little vacation down there in the summer.
So as we're coming to the end of our time together, I have just 2 more questions.
Oh no.
What words of wisdom or advice would you give about living in this community to young people and to older members?
What words of advice? I think as you grow older, as you get into high school, you're going to think, oh, I can't stand this little town. I just can't wait to get away. And I think we all do that. I can remember doing that. I was like, oh, Cooperstown, I thought I knew everything there was to know about it. And I just needed to branch out and learn something new and get away. I didn't go far at first, but then spent a lot of time elsewhere. But I think if I had to say something to kids, I'd probably say appreciate where you are, because you're going to come to love it. You don't believe that, but as you get older, you'll find it's a great place. And I think, so in that, I think I'd say learn to appreciate what you have here, because I think you're going to find it is a great base. You're going to have a great start on life coming from a small town. Not just Cooperstown necessarily. I think many small towns, and probably because I don't know cities, because I didn't grow up there, probably some city kids would say that about their little community. So maybe the answer is appreciate the community you're in, because they all have something for you as long as you kind of make it that way. So I think you've got to enjoy yourself, have a positive attitude. And I think I say that to even adults today. I serve as village attorney. I go to most of the village boards. There's always complaints. I've served on school boards. I've served as an attorney for school boards and for towns. The city of Binghamton I was counsel for. I think you're always going to find people who have complaints. But I think to say to an adult, appreciate what you have, and then we'll work on the problems we face. Because really the problems most of these towns and villages have aren't that serious. Most things work pretty well. So appreciate where you are and what you have.
And is there anything else that you'd like us to know about your life growing up in this community?
Well, what else could I tell you about my life? It was full of freedom. I think I've already said that. It was a wonderfully serendipitous time where I think it probably is reminiscent of some of the books you're going to read, if you haven't already, like a Tom Sawyer or whatever, where you just kind of had freedom. You were off. There would be mornings I would just be out and might not be back all day. And parents didn't worry about you back then. You just would do your thing, enjoy your time, and have fun and get back, and wouldn't really cause big problems. But I don't know. I never really got in trouble. So it was just kind of a fun, wonderful time.
Thank you so much for coming after being canceled.
Oh, Riley, I love it, and I wouldn't have missed it.